Hi, my name is Dr. Rayshawn Ray, aiming to speak truth to power, and this is my daily thought. I want to talk about why Melania Trump's plagiarism is about white privilege, and in many ways, this is building upon Dr. Brittany Cooper's piece in Cosmo, where she laid out and discussed many of the things that I'm going to expand on here today. Um, I've served on the judicial board at a couple of universities. And if Melania Trump submitted her speech as a paper, she would have got an F and immediately been reported to the judicial board. And on that board, particularly if she was a graduate student, she might not be able to actually end up getting her degree. I mean, this is how serious plagiarism actually is. Also, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is stemming from a conversation I had with Thomas James, who is an author and a master barber and a cosmetologist in Tennessee, and has written an influential book called The Blueprint on how individuals can better prepare and pass their state certification to be a licensed barber and cosmetologist. What took this viral in many ways, this incident around plagiarism, had to do with social media, and it had to do with the memes that were created. And I know that a lot of people thought a lot of things were funny. Some of the things I didn't find as funny, and I particularly didn't find the plagiarism as funny, but there were some memes that I felt like hit the point. I'm going to read a few of my favorites. This one says, Melania Trump plagiarism of Michelle Obama continues to show how whites can culturally appropriate blackness as their own and face no consequences. So this incident is funny until it's not, right? I mean, and this next one says, if the first lady can't get no respect, who can? Of course, the respect with the K at the end, in line with the way that Baby from Cash Money and the Big Timers, the incident he had on the Breakfast Club. This next one says, from Lewis Latimer to Michelle Obama, stealing from blackness and acting as if it's yours, then lying and denying it has few consequences. That's really profound. So Lewis Latimer, if you don't know who he is, you definitely should. One of the most important inventors in human history. He's credited with inventing a significant part of the light bulb as well as the telephone. I actually don't know what we would do as humans without light, without electricity, and without our phones. So long before Steve Jobs, Thomas Edison, and Bell hired Lewis Latimer because he was the person to go to. And the point of mentioning Lewis Latimer in this context is because he's African American. This next meme says, the irony that Republicans cheered Melania Trump for using Michelle Obama's words that they booed Michelle Obama for writing and saying with original thought. And that was pretty good. This next one says, Melania didn't steal Michelle's speech. She discovered it like Columbus. So, what's interesting about this is that what these memes highlight are the ways that black people are to be used, abused, and cast to the side. And we should be happy. Black people should be happy with the scraps of food that we originally picked from the garden, clean, cooked, and set on the table for others to consume without credit for our labor. As scholars have noted, education scholars, sociologists, race scholars, from Lewis Latimer to Michelle Obama, blacks continuously put in invisible labor that is not acknowledged, valued, or recognized. Chris Christie said something interesting when he was interviewed about it. He said, well, 70% of the speech was original. And I thought about that, and I was like, surely people know that then that means 30% is actually not original, and that means it's plagiarized. I mean, that is an egregiously high percentage of plagiarism. But regardless of how ludicrous the defense is, it's actually understandable and actually rational for whites who are used to people believing everything they say as word is bond. And this is why this has to do with white privilege. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, then I'm going to talk about a classic text to help us think about white privilege, and that's thinking about Peggy McIntosh and the work that built on her work. I want to harken back to a classic story that everyone knows, that they're told when they're young. That's Goldilocks and the Three Bears. What did Goldilocks do? Well, she broke into someone's house. She ate their food, messed up all their stuff, slept in their bed. If we actually think about this from a criminal justice standpoint, that's breaking and entering. That's a felony. Burglary. That's a felony. I mean, she committed several felonies, right? And we act like that she didn't do those things. Now, how this relates to what we're talking about is, imagine if Goldilocks wasn't white. Imagine what would happen to Goldilocks if she was not white. And that is essentially white privilege in its essence. Another way to think about white privilege, or as Dr. Eduardo Bonilla Silva, who is a professor and chair at Duke University in the Department of Sociology, he talks about honorary whiteness as part of his triracial system. And I've heard people say, well, Melania Trump isn't white. And I'm like, what do you call her then? I mean, she's from Southern Europe, and she passes the 20-foot rule. The 20-foot rule is when someone is 20 feet away from you, what do you unconsciously perceive their race to be? Right? That becomes very important. At 20 feet away, Melania Trump looks white. Even 1 feet away, she looks white to me. Right? And so it becomes very interesting the way that people try to frame whiteness. And what's interesting is that whiteness, the reason why this is important is because whiteness is given the benefit of the doubt. Whiteness is perceived as less threatening. Thus, people who embody whiteness go through society often unencumbered by the experiences of non-whites. Now, Peggy McIntosh breaks this down a bit. And what she actually says is that whiteness is a taken for granted assumption and a privilege that affords certain individuals more power, control, opportunities, and resources that impact life chances, perceptions, aspirations, and expectations. Some of the other research highlights a few other points that I think are important. Whiteness oftentimes assumes that whites should be in control and other groups should be subordinate. Whiteness usually gives a person comfort that others will care about their social well-being and care to hear their story. And that's essentially what we saw with this particular incident. Whiteness also entitles individuals to the residual benefits of the past, while those who are not white suffer the consequences. I talked about this the other day as it relates to the making of the middle class, and particularly the white middle class that we know to exist today. Whiteness also allows individuals to own their mistakes instead of the mistakes of others in the group, or without letting down the group. We saw that with the staffer who came forward and said that the staffer wanted to resign, and the Trump said, no, don't resign, right? And I'll talk about that in a second. Finally, related to what's happening more broadly around Black Lives Matter and police brutality, is that whiteness gives you the flexibility to know that someone in your group can commit a crime, such as an act of terror, and you will not be profiled for it. So, as we think about that, I think part of the reason why the staffer who offered to resign and the Trump said no, first it had to do with the uptick of publicity. I think Trump, people have to realize that he is a businessman, he's a marketer, and he oftentimes assumes that any publicity is good publicity. And I think we've seen that, the way that his name continues to be in the news. Second, I think there are a few consequences for stealing from blackness. In fact, some may perceive someone like Trump and his wife getting away with an act of plagiarism on a very powerful black person such as Michelle Obama, that this is indeed the ultimate example of exerting white dominance. And see, this is what Black Lives Matter is all about. The fact that in society anything can be done to black people with few consequences, legal or otherwise. So from the perspective of white privilege, plagiarizing the words of blacks is actually rational. Whiteness allows people who embody it to take stuff with few consequences. So this is how you can know whether or not people are really embodying whiteness. It's how much they try to justify this plagiarism act, right? When in any other situation, it couldn't be justified at all. But that's what whiteness does. It actually becomes rational that people are going to believe your story even when you've done something wrong, and that the mistakes of others aren't going to necessarily impact you. Or as Chris Riddick, who was a friend of mine in graduate school and currently works in DC, said, or better yet, it reminds us that some people get the privilege of being forgiven while others' lives are forever marked. So on that note, thank you for joining me. If you are interested in what we're trying to do here, feel free to subscribe at youtube.com/RRAY217. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Sociologist Ray. And again, conversations matter, like Black lives and books. Thank you.